Okay. Welcome, everybody. Have a good evening. I hope everybody's doing well. Really exciting tonight. Jason's not going to be joining us, so I'm going to conduct the whole interview. He's on his way to Paso with his wife and family, and I don't think they were going to get there in time to do it. We were thinking maybe do a remote, but with David and Scott, if possible, but that's not going to work out. So really excited. This is actually the 17th episode. I can't believe where we've come full circle since this group got big, where we're at right now. You know, it just became an idea in late 21, and we've gone around, and I just added somebody to the booking for March of 24. Wow. Andy Neha from Cairns, right? And I added Edgar Torres for February. So it's I'm getting calls that, you know, there's industry people that winemakers that want to participate. And our show's a little bit different from, say, Adam Montiel's. It's a little bit different. It's not too grape related, so to speak. So we're so happy to have you here. I also want to just make a quick announcement too. I am going on a trip, so I was going to let people know that if you want any glasses or aerators or a tasting journal, I need to ship those soon because I'll be gone for about 10, 11 days. And then, of course, glasses you can pick up at Copia downtown and the Adelaida tasting room as well. So before we get started, I just wanted to ask everybody if they wanted to show us what they were drinking tonight. Hi, Laura and Joe. I'm going to turn this around. This is very good. So I hope everybody took advantage, for those that could take advantage of the nice special that DeAnn and David Taylor offered up here. So anyways, let's, what do they do here? Okay. I just wanted to introduce our guests. Really excited. I had the opportunity to meet DeAnn and David Taylor in late March, just before the party, and went over there and they gave me a tour and we did a nice tasting, and I really love the wine, and they're just super nice people. And I happen to know the manager, Nikki, from another winery that we were at tasting, and it's a really nice place. So if you haven't been there, you should try to make a reservation there. And it's either Rhone varietals, and then they have a Pinot and Chardonnay, and really nice wines, And it's in the Tin City area, if you didn't know, right on the entrance, pretty much, right when you enter Tin City. They're conveniently located out there, not in the real crowded section of it. So we're really excited. So first, gentleman on the right, it's nice. To my left is Scott Stelzle. I have not met you. Nice to meet you, Scott. He is the Cordant winemaker. He's got an interesting background we'll hear about. I mean, he's been in real estate development. You were owner of Ventoux Vineyards, correct? And you're now with the COO at Estrella Warbirds Museum. So we'll get some information about that. And then David, he and his wife own Cordant, and they founded Cordant in 2014. And David comes from a tech background, and you sold your company to GoPro, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm going to let them tell their story, but let's see. So I'm going to ask, because we have two different perspectives here, I'm just going to kind of ask a question you guys can both answer. So Scott, what did you do before you were in wine? You got into the wine business.
I lived in Scottsdale, Arizona from probably 1986 up through almost 2000. And I believe it or not, I started off in the furniture business and then that moved into construction and parts of construction. I owned a cabinet company and a door company and then started doing full construction projects and then real estate development. And at that time, started visiting California quite a bit. Napa a lot back in the day. Started a wine collection, a lot of back and forth travel. It's pretty hot in Arizona. So most of the summer days, we'd like to try to get over to San Diego on the weekends if we could, or Napa. And just sort of fell in love with the wine and the lifestyle and the food and everything related to that. And got to a point where I decided, when I kind of had enough of the growth of Phoenix and wanted to live in a little bit more of a small town, where would I go? And at that point, one of my original intents was Napa, but it was getting really crowded and really expensive fast. And I came to Paso just on a visit, really, and kind of fell in love with the area and started buying property here in the end of 99 and early 2000, and planted my first vineyard in 2003. And then I built the winery at Ventura in 2005 and did, 14 vintages there, and then sold it and retired and tried to pursue some of my hobbies out at the Warbird Museum, flying old airplanes and having some fun out there. And got to know David through a neighborhood wine club that we were in together. And he was telling me all about Cordant and things that they wanted to do and in the future make some changes, and asked if I'd be willing to help out with some of that. And I said I would help out a little bit, and then started helping out a lot of bit. And now here I am full time. So
Yay.
that's kind of how that's the short version of it all.
You've been there since what, 21?
21, yeah. Yeah.
What kind of plane do you have?
I've got a variety of different old military aircraft that I fly, from an early 1940s J5 Cub, which is the smallest thing, right up to a military version of a DC-3, which is it's called the C-47. Holds about 40 people.
Great. David, your start or your journey to getting into the wine business.
Yeah, so I'm a tech guy. Went to school at Cal Poly down here, electronic engineering, and loved it. Never thought I would be back though, because last thing I could predict was I'd be in the wine industry. But I started, I didn't know very much, but I started traveling to Edna Valley even in college, and we just got really interested in wine. After I graduated, I was in Silicon Valley for about 18 years. Lots of fun tech stuff, and then ended up transitioning down to San Diego, doing the same thing. More wine friends down there, and so food and wine was always just an important, fun part of what we did. But tech was the main thing, and after the last startup company I did, which GoPro acquired in 2011, which seems, when you do the math, it's like infinitely long ago, but seems like yesterday. Then I always kind of did startup companies. So I was having difficulty with either getting excited about either of, my ideas or anybody else's. So it's like, okay, what are we going to do now? Let's start a winery. And in 2014, Cordant Winery was born, and we've always been Pinot Noir fans. We've been Rhone fans, and in certain areas like Sonoma and like Santa Barbara County, it's very common to run into both of those. In Paso Robles, tends to be more of a Rhone area. You don't really grow a lot of Pinot around here. Climate isn't always best for Pinot. But we also made a choice to buy fruit. And so we began then and continue now. We have about 15 different vineyard sources each harvest. And we buy fruit from Monterey County, down through Paso Robles and Edna Valley near SLO, and down to Santa Barbara County. And being as we can buy cool climate Syrah in those counties north and south, we can also buy Pinot Noir. So we really do both. And we started to focus really on what can we provide that's a little bit different maybe than some other wineries in Paso. As we all know, there's 250 different wineries down here. And we focus on kind of vineyard sources. And so we have a lot of very nice vineyards for Pinot Noir and Rhone style wines. And so we have different weather patterns and microclimates and so forth. So we can offer maybe just some things that are a little bit different than some others. And certainly Pinot Noir is a little bit different than as well. So that's what we do.
What really motivated you, both Scott and David? What motivated you to get into wine? It was just a thought, and this sounds like a good idea, or did you have something that something that triggered your interest in it, other than just a love of wine? It's
For me, I had honestly no intention of making wine. I really wanted to get into the farming and the agricultural side of it. So planting the vineyard and growing the grapes was really the first thing that I wanted to do, and really kind of long term, that was my plan. And then I met a few local winemakers who I started hanging out with their group and being a part of what they're doing. And they were like, you need to be able to do some of this too. So I was able to utilize some of their facilities and make some wine in the first couple of years without having to build a winery, experiment with it a little bit. And I seem to really like it. And it was part of the lifestyle here. It was, something I could see myself doing at least for the next couple of decades. And I think I might have kept doing it. It just, I don't know if you've been over to Ventura, but it just grew to a point with the hospitality and the bed and breakfast and the parties and the events and everything else. It just became a little bit too much to manage on a daily basis. There wasn't a lot of privacy, and I wasn't enjoying it after a while. But it wasn't the making of the wine and the farming I wasn't liking. It was just all the chaos attached to running a larger scale business. So coming to Cordant and being able to just focus on the vineyards, the grapes, and the production of the wine, David handles everything else. So it makes it much, much more easier for me, and it's more enjoyable.
Now you built the facilities over at Ventura, right?
Yes. Yeah. When I bought that property, there was a tiny little farmhouse on it that was falling down, and a little garage, and that was about it. So everything you see there was all started from scratch.
Great. David?
For me, I was really passionate about the tech industry. I loved it, but I enjoyed doing startups, and startups is a lot of hours, and it's a lot of work, and you have to really enjoy it. So I was having some difficulty figuring out my next startup, and I was always in wine groups with friends in the Bay Area when I was in Silicon Valley and in San Diego. And so it was just an area that kind of called to me. And so we just started doing some research on it and thought we could do something maybe just a little bit different. The reason we chose Paso, by the way, which I suppose when you start a winery, you can go to a lot of different places. San Luis Obispo in the Edna Valley and then Santa Barbara County has a longer history than Paso Robles does, but Paso is just on this rocket ride, beginning in the early 2000s and through the 2010s and so forth. So it seemed like the right place to establish roots. And what a wonderful community it is here. The people are great. And so it was a good choice as we look back, but it was really because of where Paso was going that we chose to set down roots here.
Great. What, Scott, did you have any mentors in the industry that you?
Yeah, when I first moved here, I bought the property that was just about the time Turley was purchasing Piseni. And I got to know some of the people that were working for the original Piseni family. And I got to know them, and they were all about dry farming and old way of doing things. And then Sherman Smoot and Kevin Healy that had Bella Luna Winery. I ended up buying a tractor from them. In the first couple of weeks, I didn't even live here yet. I was still visiting, going back and forth, and I bought a tractor from them. And next thing you know, they invited me to go to Europe for a week and tour around Portugal and learn some things. So by the time we got done with that trip, they had completely convinced me to move full time over here and start planting a vineyard and start thinking about, getting in the wine business more long term. So, those guys were old school Paso Robles, families that have been here for years and years and years, dry farming the old way and kind of doing it the way Paso started out. I had those groups of friends that I followed in their roots of the way I developed that vineyard. But then I also had a series of friends that I had that were more on the newer style of cutting edge of farming and winemaking. So I was fortunate, Chris Cherry was a good friend, and from Via Creek, and some of the other guys that were kind of gave me a lot of mentoring on as far as the new style of what Paso was becoming, so it was a good blend of the original old way and the new way of what their future was. And I got the benefit of both of that just by all the people who were nice to me when I moved here.
How about you, David? Did anybody, when you got started, were there people that consulted with you and you consulted with, and somebody that helped you?
So, not so much. I just decided I want to get into the wine business. And, so yeah, it's a little unfair. So when I first started, one of the things I learned in the tech business, and I carry with me today, is that innovation, inspiration, and hard work comes primarily from those young guys. And the one thing I realized when I came into the business, almost 10 years ago, this will be our 10th harvest this year, is that I did not want to be the winemaker. That would be a fool's errand, I think, to try to compete with all of the young guys who were so passionate about what was going on in Paso at the time. And so I did have a winemaker when we started the business. Ultimately, we ended up probably not being the best partners together. And so we separated ways a while ago. But in those early days, I learned a little bit from him. And I have always, because I always did startups in tech, I always loved starting businesses. And in some ways, a P&L is a P&L, although there is so much more, and there's so many differences between a tech business and a wine business. And there's different people that have their hands in the pot, like the government, and anytime you do anything with alcohol. So we got lots of reports, and we got lots of all of that stuff. And wine is a romantic business, right? People come into the tasting room and they have a good time, and you never ever want to show them anything differently than that. But there's a lot behind the scenes, and I just kind of learned that and figured it out. At the end of the day, you have to have a great product, hopefully, to start out with. And that kind of drives the business. And so we want to do everything we can to do that, and then have a great experience. So that was kind of the area that I focused on, while realizing that we wanted to have as good a product as we can. And I'm really excited I was able to convince Scott to come join us a couple of years ago.
Great. Was there a wine that really influenced how, like, you're choosing? What made, I'm going to ask David this, what made you decide to go to Rhone varietals? That love, passion for them, or how did you come around to decide what your lineup would look like?
Well, it's a very reasonable question. Yeah. So I've always been a Pinot guy. Although I am kind of like a guy, if you walk through the vegetable aisle in the store and somebody asks you what's your favorite vegetable, it's kind of like, I can't really answer that question. What am I having for dinner? Right.
Right.
And so it's not as if it's Pinot at the exclusion of everything. It's what am I trying to do that night? But I've always enjoyed Pinot Noir a lot. And it would be a go-to wine. I think it's very flexible, goes with a lot of different foods. And I think similarly, Rhones are like that as well. They go with a different style of food, but I think they overlap. Hey, cabs are great, but I don't drink cabs every day. I think they're a little bit more limited, at least my perspective. Everybody's perspective is different. And so I really focused in on Rhones and Pinots. And I always loved what was going on in Sonoma and Santa Barbara County, where the growing conditions really allowed you to do both styles of wines, and so many wineries do. And because we made the choice in Paso to buy fruit, and I actually studied this model a lot also. Do I want to buy property? Do I want to buy fruit? And for various reasons, I landed on the decision to buy fruit. And if I'm going to be in Paso and I'm going to drive north and south for fruit, I can get Pinot Noir from those locations as well, because they're fantastic locations. I think Scott told me last year he put 10,000 miles on the truck, though, in our very short harvest in 2022.
Wow.
So that's one of the things we have to do. And we have 15 vineyards, both north and south. But yeah, those are the varieties that I just kind of enjoyed. My wife enjoys those. And so that's where we landed.
Yeah, Scott, your lineup, when I looked at Ventoux, I assume it's not much different than when you left there in 17. The labels, right? The varieties, the varietals.
Yeah,
So
they're
you're
similar.
more Bordeaux over there, correct?
They're going that direction, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great.
But there was, my answer to that question is a little bit different than David's, because the answer is the same. Which is your favorite? It's what I'm drinking tonight. But I've been collecting wines personally for over 30 years, and I've gone through lots of phases by varietal, by regions of the world, and I'll find myself. There was 2 years where all I was doing was buying Shiraz from Australia, and then all of a sudden I found out about their Grenache, and I did that, and then Pinot Noir from everywhere, really, mostly Burgundy if I can get it. But Spanish Grenache in the last few years. I went through an Italian phase. So I try to keep my collection as diverse as possible and try to realize that different grapes grow differently in different parts of the world, and everybody can express that differently. So for Paso Robles, if you're just going to grow grapes in Paso, you're going to be limited to what your property can sustain and what's available to you locally. And that was kind of one of the things that was most attractive about coming on board at Cordant, was we weren't just limited to Paso Robles. David wasn't afraid to be able to, like you said, go south to Santa Barbara and north to Monterey. And we've talked about things like maybe we'll do a Russian River Pinot one day. Maybe we'll fly the plane to Oregon and fill it up with grapes and bring it back. There's no real limits to trying to show a different varietal that's grown in a different area and make it in our style of vinification here, but then showing people that here's what this grape would taste like if we do it our way. Doesn't necessarily have to be from right outside our back door. So we've got some ideas of doing some different interesting things in the future. So, our regular wine club members, hopefully we're going to keep them thinking, well, what's going to be next? What's going to be next? It's not just the same old things every year. That all they're going to do is our own varietals. We're committed to do some dry farm Cabernet this year, which we've never done here before. Hopefully I didn't let a secret out.
That's all right.
There's a vineyard up in Mendocino that's 100-year-old dry farm Carignan that I love, and I'm on the list to get some more of that someday. And just like I said, doing something that's every year we're going to try to promise to do something a little different and interesting that people don't expect. That it will showcase what that grape does in that terroir, in that region, and we'll just make it here.
My experience has been when I go out tasting, a lot of the winemakers pretty much they make what they like to drink. And that's
Right.
The winemaker in particular. I'm always interested in the owner. The owner starts off and he has a vision, but it's got to be around varietals that he has a passion for. So the question's always pretty much the answer is the same.
Well,
Yeah.
Scott and I met personally through, I don't know, March of 2020, right? Get a call from one of our friends. So the world is shut down. They go, hey, you're coming over for dinner tonight. We go, okay. So we created our own little pod, and every Saturday night since, through now and beyond, we get together for dinner. And I didn't know Scott when we started, actually. So Scott started bringing all these old Ventoux wines. It's like, these are fantastic. These are really good. We have to be working together one of these days. And so when you were talking about styles and winemakers and owners and are they aligned, one of the things I discovered is that we had a very similar palate. I remember in some of those first weeks, we brought literally the same wine
From
from
France.
the same vintage.
Yeah.
And to share with the group.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. And so being in alignment is really important in any business, I think. And so for us, it's worked out really well in that way.
So other than wine, what is your favorite adult beverage, Scott?
I've got a pretty wide variety of brown liquor at home,
Yeah,
so mostly from Kentucky.
that's
And
me.
yeah, I like that. My girlfriend's kind of a margarita girl, so we're drinking those quite frequently around the pool. But when it comes down to or going to a bar and ordering a cocktail, it's usually a Manhattan, an old fashioned, or something bourbon just by itself with the proper ice cube.
Right. Or a cube, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
singular. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, David?
So I'm not as much into brown liquor as Scott, but one of my favorite drinks is actually a paper plane, bourbon oriented. And I think I was introduced to that by Jillian over at the Hatch in town. And so that is definitely one in terms of brown liquor.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is actually good lemon finish to kind of cut the back end on that. But otherwise I kind of drink wine. I'll definitely join Molly and Scott in a margarita once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's what's behind the name of the winery, David?
Right. So because it's always funny,
I
right?
knew that was
So
coming.
when you're
I
when
gave
you're
you
the-
these questions in advance.
I know you
knew it
did.
was
I know.
coming.
I know. When you're the 8,000th winery in California to open the
Right.
doors, and all of the primary, secondary, and tertiary names are already taken with URLs, then you try to get creative. And it was funny because I know way too many attorneys as friends and wine people, and so I had one of them on kind of standby on the trademark side. It's like, hey, Carl, what do you think about this name? Nope, not a chance. It's gone. And so we came up with the name Cordant, which really is a derivative. It's kind of a made up word, but it's a derivative of the word accord or accordant, which is basically the coming together and reaching agreement. And so, we have a lot of different vineyard sources, a lot of different microclimates. We bring in a lot of different things, and we try to put those together in a style that, works in agreement with kind of what we're doing. And so that seemed a little bit appropriate to what we wanted to do at the winery. So the name Cordant came up, and others have used it, it turns out, but certainly not in the wine industry. And yeah. And the second story we tell is we were going to be bottling in about 2 or 3 months. Our first bottling, it's like, what the hell are we going to call ourselves here? Right. And it was like 6 bottles of wine and 5 people. And at the end of the night, it's like, it's Cordant, damn it. That's it. So there's always, the first story was kind of the story you tell and you might put on a website, but the last story is kind of like, we got to make a decision. What is it? This is what
Right.
it is.
What was your first vintage?
2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
this
what-
vintage will be our 10th. So which
How
is
many
exciting.
labels did you have then, and what was the primary flagship?
Right. So
know?
some of us who have known us for a while may have known us as Cordant Nell. We carried 2 brands. The first winemaker that I had, a fellow named Tyler, had a brand that he had created as an assistant winemaker at various places, because it's very not uncommon at all for assistant winemakers to make wine and have a label. And that was his mother's middle name. And once Tyler and I separated, it was a brand that I didn't really want to promote more. And I think Tyler would like to have that brand in the future, so he might. And so we have relabeled everything as Cordant. The wine varieties we support have not changed. Our styles have changed a little bit. We're dialing things back a little bit more finesse, a little bit more elegance, maybe a little less alcohol. And so I think there's a trend in Paso in that direction, which I'm kind of enthused about. Paso has always been this, oh yeah, the big alcohol, high fruit, kind of wines in the past. And I've kind of wanted to dial things back. And so that's that fell, it seemed very nicely in what Scott wanted to do as well. So yeah, so we're now Cordant Winery, and the old brown craft labels that we've had are mostly gone, soon to be gone.
Your labeling's nice. It's really, really elegant looking, and yeah, nice job.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
When so tell us, maybe you can give us something, what makes your winery a little more unique than, let's say, everybody else? That's a tough one, I know, but
Well, I don't know. We'll try. I'll start. You can add or correct or whatever. But so I guess one thing at a high level is we get various stories from customers who come in, and even other wineries. When a customer asks them, where can I get a good Pinot Noir around here? So that's one of the answers is, well, you should maybe go try Cordant and see what you think about those. And so that's one thing that's a little bit different. And our Pinot Noirs come from those areas that generally, do very nice Pinot Noirs and some of the vineyard sources we have. But then in terms of our Rhones, we definitely buy some Rhone fruit from Paso Robles. However, we buy a lot of Syrah and other Rhone varieties outside of the area. So I think, for instance, our Syrahs have a little bit more cool climate influence than some. We like that personally. So again, that's kind of a, owner winemaker perspective on that a little bit, but it differentiates us a little bit from some local wineries who focus more exclusively on Paso fruit.
I'm a big fan of Syrah. Where are you sourcing the fruit for the Syrah? It's good too, by the way. So
thank you. One of our vineyards that we're really excited about is one that's not as well known, I think, within the wine community, but it is such a special site. It's called Coast View Vineyard. And Coast View, if you're driving north from Paso to the Bay Area, and you're heading north on 101, on your left is the Santa Lucia Highlands. And on your right are a bunch of mountains that you never really thought of, but they're known as the Gabilan Mountains. And so they're on that east side of the Salinas Valley. And there's a vineyard up at the top there that is known as Coast View Vineyard. Coast View is about a 20-acre parcel. It's, I think, the most beautiful vineyard site that we purchased fruit from. They spared no expense in the terracing. It reminds you, for those of you, to the extent you might have been to Priorat, reminds you of what a Priorat kind of looks like. And it produces some fantastic Syrah and Grenache. We've started experimenting a little bit with some Pinot Noir from that site as well. But from a Rhone standpoint, that's a really wonderful site. We've been buying fruit from there since the beginning. And yeah, it's a staple of ours.
Scott, you have anything to add on unique?
I think, from being different from all the, and I don't know what the number is now, it's somewhere over 300 wineries in the Paso area. A lot of those are estate wineries. A lot of those are wineries that produce bulk type purchase fruit. There's a lot of labels you don't recognize. You'll be somewhere and you'll see a wine that says, oh, it's from Paso Robles. You've never heard of it before, but it's a label from Paso. So Cordant is a place, and there's a team of people here, and we are trying to source the best possible fruit that's available to us from wherever that's going to be. And not everybody does that in Paso. So the idea that you can come here and try multiple varietals from multiple regions, I think there's only a small handful of people that are really doing that and doing it right. So if people, the only so many wineries you can visit when you come to Paso Robles for the weekend. So it really depends on the consumers that really want to kind of go outside the box and try something that's uniquely different and kind of really expresses what all of this region of California has to offer.
Well, I can tell you from being the founder of this group and reading a lot over the last 3 years, is that our membership is mostly interested in the smaller producers, and that kind of more personal experience.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, when they're asking David for a Pinot, your name will come up because we get that question a lot, like, where can I get a good Pinot? And
Right.
the members will answer, and they know where to go, and they try to guide people when they can, so.
Yeah, we have four or five of them that we only make, some of them as little as 150 to 200 cases of them. So each one of them is very special.
So what do you find the most challenging part of this? I'm going to call it two different things: wine business and wine making, because two perspectives here, which will be interesting. But what do you find most challenging, David?
Well, a very high level answer is it's one thing to make a good product, regardless of what business you're in. It's another one to sell it, right? So at a high level, it's about how do you sell the cool widget you made? And in some ways, wine is a widget. Now, I say that in a very, flip way, but it's about how do you sell your product? And so you've got to, figure out how to do that. And part of it is trying to differentiate your brand a little bit. And part of it is defining who your customer is, being able to target that customer. And so we do as good a job as we can at that. We make about 3,000 cases a year, little tad more, but about that. And that's small enough that it means that we focus more on a direct to consumer model. So we're not as much in a distribution model. And so as I'm answering your question, I'm kind of narrowing down what our focus is going to be in terms of getting our product out there and getting it known to people a little bit. And so we're about 85% direct to consumer. You find our product just a little bit out in the channel. We dabble with that a little bit because we'd like to have it be in some restaurants and so forth. So that's what we are focusing on, is just making people aware of our product. We try to have a great experience inside, because I think what most people realize is having a good wine is necessary, but it's not always sufficient to have a strong business. And you have to create an experience that's enjoyable for people, because when they come back, often what they'll say is, I like this place, because I think they have good wine, but I really have fun when I go there. And so it's trying to create that broader, personality for your winery. So that's the hardest part, I think, for people. Scott can make fantastic wine. If we can't sell it to people, then that's a different problem.
Well, my experience is, and I say this over and over again, is people buy from people they like.
Yeah.
There's good wine in Paso in a lot of places, so you have to always kind of make the experience unique. But Scott, you've been on both sides of it. You've been in the business side as an owner and the winemaking. What do you think is most challenging?
I don't know. After doing it for 20 years, challenges change, but I totally agree with David as far as, brand recognition and things change with the economy. COVID was a thing. We've got to keep our customers happy with what we're doing and wondering on what we're going to do next. My biggest issues have probably been more logistical than anything. And that's always about trying to predict the weather, trying to predict what fruit is going to be ripeness, next. When am I going to be picking that? Am I going to be able to go get it when it needs to be picked? Are the growers going to be able to do what I need to be done? Is the facilities of the winery going to be ready to be able to receive that? It's a constant calling audibles and changing daily. And then you start getting those long hours, you get a little exhausted, and you're starting to, wonder what's going to happen tomorrow. And last year was a real challenge of all of that, because as that weather was something that we couldn't have expected. And as we were tasting through those wines in the barrel now, I'm just blown away by how good they are. And I'm shocked by the level of ripeness and the way the acid and fruit is balanced by the extreme heat that we had. But it was a real benefit to have a broader spectrum of a 300-mile or whatever it is circle to pull fruit from, as opposed to just right outside your back door. That was a lot more challenging being in a state vineyard and having everything right there exposed to whatever it's going to be and only have one hand dealt to you to play, that was much more challenging. So I'm more excited about the ability to be able to work with multiple things in multiple areas.
Well, this is just an observation because something came to mind when you were talking about, you were saying 3,000 cases. And when you are in the estate end of it, your yields are subject to whatever the weather, what Mother Nature gives you. And some of
Right.
them are way down, and you've seen those wineries, the bottle price has gone way up when they're used to doing 2,500 and they're getting 1,600 cases, right? You see the
Yeah.
price start to shift. It seems to me like your business model lends itself to not having that as much of that kind of pressure on you as some of the other wineries in the area. But I don't know if you agree with that statement or not, but maybe.
You know, when we buy fruit, the largest cost component to a bottle of wine is cost of fruit, no question. And our fruit prices continue to go up. So we have some of that pressure, but a little bit to Scott's point, we also are maybe a little less susceptible to some of the localized weather problems that an estate vineyard has. And I would never say that having an estate vineyard is, you know, not the right thing to do. We made our choice to buy fruit, not necessarily because of that. There's a big cash component required to buying an estate vineyard. You know, I always remembered the story. Being a Pinot guy, I was always a Williams Sellium fan. And Williams and Sellium used to tell a story. They didn't even have any written contracts. They had handshake agreements with everybody. They bought fruit forever from other people, and they made fantastic Pinot Noir. And it's a really good model, and it works really well for us. We are interested and actually doing a little bit of looking on whether some estate on the west side of Paso might be something that makes sense for us. So we might add that component into it. I don't think we'll ever give up the wonderful vineyards that we purchase from right now, but it could be an additional element that we add to the program. But you know, you evolve a little bit. And I do like the diversity of buying fruit from a lot of different microclimates. We have some unique things to offer people.
Right. So do you think, so I'm kind of geeky about this kind of stuff, and I know it comes up a lot because bottle prices have gone up, but what do you think the top two or three things are that drive the fruit prices?
Cost of fruit?
Yeah, the price of fruit, yeah.
What's driving that is, I'd say labor cost. There's been, it's, you know, in my early days, I remember getting guys to pick vineyards and prune and pull leaves and shoot thin. I mean, it was anywhere between $12 and $15 an hour. And now it's 3 or 4 times that, you know, just the cost of the tractors, the cost of the, everything related to the farming is more and more and more expensive. So when those growers own that land and everything they've got to invest, not to mention the cost of the dirt now itself is so much more ridiculous than it ever used to be. They have no choice but to pass that on to us. So the fruit's
Right.
going to be more expensive. And then we've got to process that fruit with, you know, thank God our existing equipment that we currently have. But then all of a sudden, okay, now we need barrels to put it in. And oh, wait a minute, shipping from Europe is now 5 times what it used to be. And the barrels are now this price. So now we've got that much more money into the barrels, and barrel program is a huge part of the successful winery. You can't not buy great fruit, and you can't not buy great barrels and expect really good wine. It's just not possible. So we have to buy that fruit and we have to buy those barrels. We have no choice. And then you say, okay, well, now we want to put it in a glass bottle when it's done. And the glass bottles are now twice as price, and now corks are twice. So every single thing that just continually keeps to go up, you know, it's not that we want to pass that on to the consumer. Because one thing David and I have, our philosophy is paralleled on is we want to try to produce a wine that's a really great value and a really great price point where people can afford it and say, wow, that wine is just as good as something that's 2 or 3 times that price. And we're doing everything we can to bring that to the consumer. But it's been challenging because of the way the economic situation and how everything just keeps going up and up and up. Believe me, it's not going to our bottom line. It's It's all of our costs continually going up daily.
Right. Interesting. Very good.
Yep.
So we kind of covered what the challenges were. And by the way, the challenges, the marketing and the weather, 1, 2 is the answer for 17 of these shows now. Marketing,
Yeah.
selling the wine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Number one
That's-
challenge, almost
That's
consistently
true.
the same answer.
It's the truth in any business. When I was in tech, you could invent a cool widget, but you got to sell it.
Right, right. So with that being said, what do you find most exciting about the wine bit, about the part of making wine or the wine business? David, what do you think?
I think the community is fantastic. Being in the tech industry, I was in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley for 18 years, and then down in San Diego for a similar length of time. And there's something really unique and special about being in a small town like Paso Robles. All of the people here are great, not just people in the wine industry, but just the community at large. And so I enjoy being part of that. And for me, I enjoy branching out and doing something that's unique as the second, business in my career from what I did before. And I find that refreshing and I find it enjoyable. And so for me, it's great being part of the industry. There's just a lot of great people here.
Scott, you've been there for quite a while, so you know community very well, don't you?
Yeah, I have. And I think for me, the most exciting part is it's still a surprise to me. We end up taking these grapes and doing the best we can with picking them exactly when they're supposed to be. And we do everything that we think we're supposed to ferment them perfectly and foster them through the fermentation process and barrel them and then bottle them. And as we get down to that last stage, like right now, we're getting ready to bottle in a few weeks, some Pinot and one of our Grenaches. We were tasting through these barrels earlier today and we tasted them 6 months ago and they're completely different. So no matter what you do and no matter how you do it, it always seems to be a surprise when we pop that bung and stick the thief in and start tasting it. It's always, I can never always really predict exactly what's going to happen next. And I think that's what keeps it interesting for me.
Well, my wife and I have been going there for almost 2 decades now. And I've become more involved in the community through this this group, this Paso Robles Wine Fanatics group. I didn't expect to go on the journeys that I've been on, but everybody is so nice, and we all hear, and I know everybody will agree in the group, we hear the same stories that the community is very tight. They help each other, and if somebody needs some consulting or needs a hand, and lead a little bit of a different opinion on something, everybody's willing to pitch in. It amazes me, and I find it fascinating, and the friendships that everybody has there. I find that like someplace you want to live, like that's why Ann, I think, wants to move there or something. But
Yeah.
it's unique that I don't think you're going to find in any other wine community that I know of right now.
Yeah,
So
I can't think of it. Yeah.
Hey, I buy a bunch of wine from lots of people in Paso because I love their wine, right? It's not a competitive thing, but there's a lot of good wineries and good people around, and you want to support everybody.
So tell me, is there somebody that sticks out in your mind, David, that you really love?
I'm a big fan of Guillaume Closelin. I think, first of all, Guillaume is a fantastic guy. Just a wonderful person. I think he makes great wines. So he's a favorite of mine, but I've also been a fan of what Phil's doing up at Law and what Jordan's doing at Epic. And so these are all really, and there's a bunch more, right? There's a lot of wineries here, but I guess I do visit those wineries a bit because I enjoy what they're doing.
Right. How about you, Scott?
I don't know. I've changed it so much up over the years and there's so many new ones. I remember the original guys, from the early 2000s of everybody just kind of starting off and doing rogue things. And I was buying a lot of Paso Robles wines at that time. And I'm now unfortunately to be able to open up something that's 15, 20 years old and see how they held up. And I don't want to say specifically which ones are my favorites, but I think the original core group of people that got started in that era, nothing against all the new people that have, but like, for instance, David mentioned Yom, here's a guy who came over here from a foreign country to work for another, Stefano Seo, and went to work for him. And now through that, he's been able to live his dream and start his own thing and help other, it just, everybody just keeps helping everybody keep moving up, and that's what keeps me interested in it.
Right. So I got a question that's we find fascinating each time, and then I want to dive into the winery itself, your lineup and everything. What is a pro tip that you can share? We all are wine drinkers, and there's all kinds of discussions about how to open a bottle, aerate a bottle, or do you have anything to offer that would be interesting to our members?
You asking me or David?
He's asking you.
You go.
I don't know. I've opened hundreds of thousands of bottles of wine. I think you mentioned something about decanting. I think how old is a wine, and when should that wine be drank, and what varietal is it, and how was it made, and what was the chemistry, and what was the winemaker's philosophy. If you have some of the background in that wine, you'll have a better experience with it, I guess. So fortunately, over the years, I've picked up some things where I'm able to try a wine, whether it was just bottled yesterday, or it's and kind of I have a feel for what it's going to evolve into. And some wines are best to take home from the tasting room and drink them that year, and other wines need to be laid down 3 to 5 years. I think having open communication with the tasting room staff, asking those questions, not being shy, just ask people point blank. How was this wine made, and when do you think it would be best drank? How long should I be expected to store it? All of those kinds of things. And the proper tasting room staff should be able to educate the consumer in that, but they have to be not too shy to ask. They have to be able, because a lot of people are nervous. They feel like they don't know enough about the wine yet to ask those questions. That's how you learn. Go to wineries, ask questions, and involve yourself in all those things, and you'll learn more about it. You'll feel more comfortable about it. And you'll enjoy the wine more too.
Yeah. But when you get older, you don't want to ask them and they go, wow, you got to hold this for 10 years. I go, I don't know.
Then they look you over and you're like, well, maybe you better drink it in 7.
Is that something that's got to go to Will?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, David? Do you have anything?
Well, it's actually such a simple question. And the reason I jokingly said he's asking Scott is because it's hard to answer, and it's a very personal kind of thing. I don't know. When I taste a wine, when I open it, I try to just pay a little bit of attention. And it's when I talk to young wine drinkers, what I tell them is pay attention to the wine. It doesn't take that long. You pay attention for 2 or 3 seconds after you take a sip, every sip, and just internalize that. And then over time, you begin to learn your palate. You begin to learn how wines develop. Taste a wine when it's open, when it's first opened. Taste a wine after it's been open over a course of an hour or multiple hours. I do find that for some wines, I like to do a double decant. I have one of these, it's a decanter that has a connector to the bottle, and you turn it over and you decant into and then you put it back in the bottle this way. And
you do it 2 times, right?
But I always taste the wine before I put it in the decanter. And then after I double decant, or sometimes it's a single decant, but what you find is sometimes those edges that you have on a wine when you first open them, they kind of go away. So if you have that opportunity, always don't just decant it. Taste it first, taste it after you've decanted it, and pay attention. Just register it. It doesn't mean it's a long conversation with anybody else, but then you just begin to learn those little things about the wine. And if you're fortunate enough to have a cellar, don't always save your wines too long because they can start going bad and then you've wasted that investment too. So
Right, right.
that can be a
And
problem.
you just taught me something because I use that all the time when I don't know we're gonna drink wine. If I know I'm gonna open a big red, I'll probably decant it for a few hours, right, in a decanter, but I use
Yeah.
that a lot, and you just taught me something. It's because I don't taste it before I just assume.
Always taste it first. No.
Right.
You know, the other thing too is, you know, we've been in evenings where there's 10, 12 people there and 15 bottles of wine. And I'm always the one that's got to open them up and taste the room and see what, and some of those wines that become the wine of the evening and were the most memorable thing we drank were not that way when the cork first came out. You know, people, we pour a small round, everything, yeah, I don't know. And then later, after you've got food and hours have gone by and oxygen has done its thing, you go back and that become the wine of the night. So never give up on one that evening. Wait, you know, give it its
And
time.
we've had winemakers teach, kind of answered some of these questions in the group. And one of them was like, well, what year, how old is the wine? Because it's already kind of softened in its own, in the bottle. You
Yeah.
don't need to put as much air on it if it's 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
And it should be more drinkable almost upon opening for,
Yeah.
let it breathe for a little bit, but you don't have to go through the gyrations of, we do. And one thing I always do is when I find a wine that I want, I buy 3 bottles. This is just something I do. I'll buy one and I'll drink it like in the first 2 years. Then I'll drink the other one 3 years out, and I'll drink the last one 5 years out. It's kind of how I do it. But that's because I'm, you know, my space and time are narrowing on me. I would have gone out longer, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we in tasting rooms appreciate it when you buy 3 bottles of everything that you come in to taste, Mike. So thank you.
I was going to recommend 3 cases of everything. but-
I'm a damn good customer. That's all I can say. So, okay, so let's do, we're running out of time here. I mean, I want to be respectful of your time. Why don't you share what's about your current lineup right now to Scott or David?
All right, so we so in our Pinot Noir line, we actually have about, oh boy, about 15 different SKUs overall between our Pinot Noir and our Rhone lineup. Pinot Noir, we're pouring the 20s, about to bottle the 21s. We have a little less because of fires that caused us some problems in 20, but generally we have 3 or 4 vineyard designate Pinot Noirs and Radian Vineyard in Santa Rita Hills, Solomon Hills Vineyard, Santa Maria Valley, a Skoll Vineyard up in Santa Lucia Highlands in Monterey. We do a blend of those. We do a Chardonnay from DeAnn Vineyards now as well. We do a designate Pinot Noir Rosé from Santa Lucia Highlands. And then on the Rhone side, Resolution, we have a white. Yeah, so on the Rhone side, we have a white Rhone, which we really enjoy. You know, my palate, maybe Scott's similar, you know, 90% of the wines we drink are red. But I really enjoy some white wines to mix that up with. So we do a Chardonnay, we do a white Rhone, and then we have designate Grenache and Syrah. We've got a GSM blend. We also, in this new bottling we're going to be doing a Northern Rhone style wine. It'll be a new label, new name. That'll be available probably either later this year or early next year. So that'll be fun as we kind of focus on that Northern Rhone region a little bit. Scott mentioned this year we're actually going to do a cab, and it might be a one and done. It might be something we do forever, but we like to mix things up a little bit as well and keep things interesting. So yeah, quite a few different styles of wines. We have some wines that are Paso only. We have wines that are from different regions and end up with different characteristics of the wines too. So anyway, quick overview.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your wine club.
Wine club, yeah. We have a wine club that is 2 shipments a year, 6 bottles each. Ships in the spring, ships in the fall when it's not too hot or not too cold. We do a couple of pickup parties a year that are food oriented. We have one this year that's going to be at the Warbirds Museum. Scott's going to
Oh,
be
nice.
taking up some of our wine club members in Betsy, which is his C-47 transport, paratrooper transport plane. And then we're going to have dinner in the hangar with some planes inside and music and stuff. And we actually did a similar one last year. It was so popular, we've been asked to do it again. So we are. We also do a couple of no charge kind of meet the library wines for our customers as well. We're going to be having one of those, I think, in July this year as well. So we try to do some things, some of which are paid because it costs us money, and some of which are free because we want to share with our members some of the things we have in the cellar or small releases that we don't have enough for wine club and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And last, before I open up to questions, where can everybody find your wines?
Mostly at the winery.
Okay.
85% is direct to consumer. We hope when people are in Paso, they make some time to come by and visit. We would love to host you. Reservations appreciated, but walk-ins welcome as space is available, and sometimes it is. So, and certainly through the website, yeah, cordantwinery.com as well.
Great. So I'm going to open up to questions, and unmute yourself if you, or raise your hand, and then you can unmute and go ahead and ask your question. Dimitro.
Yeah, as somebody who have been to the winery over the last 8 years, at least 5 times, I will abuse this, and I'll have 2 questions, but pretty quick ones. One is, it's about your grape. When you buy the grapes, do you buy them by tonnage or acreage, and why? And the second question is, out of all the Pinot Noir vineyards in Central Coast, other than the ones that you are sourcing from, what are your favorite vineyards for Pinot Noir?
Okay, so the first part of the answer is we always want to buy the grapes on a tonnage contract because it gives us the most protection and the most control. Unfortunately, that puts all the liability on the grower. If it's a bad year, he's going to have less to sell. So if you're going to enter into an acreage contract, it needs to be with a grower that you really have trust in, be able to manage the farming properly, or you're going to pay a ridiculous amount of money for a small amount of grapes and you'll have no choice on that. So we have, I think, almost all of our contracts, with the exception of maybe one, are all tonnage contracts, and we buy everything 1,000 pounds at a time. They all come in 1,000-pound boxes. So, and it's almost always based on tons. So 2 boxes is a ton. And the question is, which Pinot do I like that we currently have, or do we not have?
That we don't have.
No, it's the vineyards in Central Coast that you really love, not the ones that are not the ones you are sourcing from.
Yeah, I would.
So many vineyards, so little time.
Yeah, so many vineyards all the time.
Central Coast, just Central Coast.
Central Coast, if I could have any other vineyard that we don't have yet, it'd probably be something from Gary Pisoni. Yeah.
But there's a lot of good vineyards in SLH and Santa Rita Hills. Yeah, I agree with Scott on that, but there's just so many good ones. We've added some. So, you know, Solomon Hills is owned by the Miller family, which owns Bien Nacido. And we've done a Chardonnay from Bien Nacido. In 2022, we got our very first Pinot Noir from Bien Nacido. In 20, we got our first Pinot Noir from Solomon Hills, a bit of a sister vineyard because it's owned by the same company. And so those were fantastic. Okay, so there's other vineyards to add too, but you know, yeah, Pisoni,
Yeah,
Francione.
Probably the reason for Pisoni would be because we can try so many other wines from that vineyard that other wine producers make,
And they're good.
and they're good, and we'd like to try ours against theirs. So I'd like to be able to have the same fruit, the same opportunities that other winemakers have, and then we can side by side try that same vineyard with 5 different producers and at a tasting. And I think that'd be very exciting.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment or a question? Anybody?
Yes, we did a good
Go,
job.
Joe?
I-
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, oh,
So you guys were talking about Pinot Noir from Oregon. We cut our teeth on the Oregon Pinot Noirs. That's kind of when we started our wine journey in the Willamette Valley. Where do you really like the Pinots in Oregon?
I would say the Chehalem Hills area. Brick House is one of my favorites from up there. Small producers, Dundee Hills, you know where Dundee Hills is? You know, anywhere in the Dundee Hills that is growing Pinot is definitely on the radar for us.
Been there many times. Babaca Hen Cafe, and there you
Yeah.
go. You're ready to go for the day.
Yep.
Thank you.
Laura,
Okay.
did you have a question?
I don't have a question. Nope.
Oh, okay.
He's calling on me. I'm Laura number 2.
Oh, the other Laura. You know, it's so
Oh,
rare.
yeah, right. I'm
I
sorry.
never see another Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi. No, again, I'm Laura number 2. You were here first. I know that.
What's the damn thing? You're unmuted.
So I was just wondering, I start off with questions. Where is your hangar? You said you do events at the hangar sometimes now. And
It's out of the Paso Robles Airport.
it is. Okay. And you said something about that you're actually going because your military planes are big enough that you're taking tonnage of grapes in the airplane?
That's something we're interested in doing. Yes.
Interesting. Very
Yeah, we could.
How much fruit can we get in Betsy?
About 5 tons.
5 tons,
Yeah.
10 boxes.
That's
Enough
impressive.
to make a wine out of.
But
That's
to be
impressive.
clear, that for the event, you're taking members up or participating. in
Yeah,
the-
the theory would
That's
be they would come out to the museum, have some wine, tour around, see all the airplanes, and then go for a ride. We'd fly around the Central Coast, see some of the vineyards from the air, and then come back and land and have a dinner, and then dancing and whatever else happens. You know.
Right.
Is there going to be wine service on that flight?
There is, yeah.
There
Okay.
is.
Our flight attendant Troy from the tasting room will
Yeah,
be pouring the rosé out of special flight qualified glasses.
That's a hell of a lot more than you get on the airline now.
Yes.
yeah, that is.
Okay, remind me, what kind of airplane is this? 'Cause I'm not familiar with.
It probably would have, the civilian version would be a DC-3.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, they're vintage.
Okay. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, our little Cessna, we figured out the 2 of us, and 7 cases is about what we can do in a day.
Hey, it's enough for a
They're
weekend.
finished. Yeah,
You probably get 10 cases if you take less fuel.
yeah, as long as we get home, it's all good.
I was actually picking up some glasses from D&G across the street. So I went and drove around, kind of looked around, but I didn't go inside because I didn't have time. But I want to visit the museum the next time I'm there.
Right.
There's
Anybody
also
else?
a car museum out there that's really cool
The what?
also. So there's a car
There's
museum.
also a race car museum on the property.
Oh, really? Okay. Anybody else have a question? Oh, Julie?
Okay, I had to unmute me. Your Chardonnay, I'm usually not a Chardonnay drinker, but it was so crisp and it was amazing. And that is because of the different temperatures that it's growing in.
Not yes and no. The temperature it's growing in allows us to pick it at a certain time where the acid and the sugar match just perfectly. And a lot of people in California make that same type of Chardonnay, but they let it hang much longer. So they're trying to get more of that over creamy, buttery feel.
Yeah.
And want it to be much more acidic and food friendly. So that's one of the things David and I agreed on right at the get-go, that we're going to make a more than normal acidic Chardonnay, but it's going to have enough fruit to balance with the acid.
Which it is.
Yes, it is. And we're
Thank you.
very pleased with it. Yeah.
Same thing with rosé. Same with your rosé.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that when we did our tasting, we got the white last.
Yeah.
What was the ration? I know what the tasting room told me, but can you expand upon that a little bit?
It's just a different way of doing it. You know, the wine is completely different. Once your palate is acclimated to all the acid of the acidic reds that we're tasting through, it just seems to be a better thing to have at the end if you're trying to judge it individually. If you weren't going to do it at the end of the reds, you should do it with some meats and cheeses and foods. And unfortunately, in the tasting room, we just can't provide that all the time. So it's really the best way to have it.
It's a good palate cleanser doing it at the end, isn't it?
Yes, I absolutely agree. The first time I had experienced that was at 6 Mile Bridge, and I was going,
Oh, yeah.
this is brilliant. This is brilliant because I like Big Red, you know, but I'm moving, you know, because you're right. You said in the beginning, the industry is moving to a little lighter body wine, and it's happening all over. And but I do, and theirs are big. 6 Mile Bridge, but having the white and the rosé at the end, I thought it was brilliant. And now you're probably the third or fourth winery that I've talked to that is pouring that way.
Totally agree.
Anybody else?
I have a question.
Okay, Ann, is that Ann?
Both recently traveled to.
Oh, Molly, go ahead.
You guys both traveled recently to some wine regions in Italy and Spain. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you took away from your trip that might influence your practices at Cordant.
That is a really good question.
Wow.
I'll let you answer that.
Learned.
I don't know if there's anything specific other than it reinforced the amount of commitment to how hard it is to farm these grapes and how much work and how much appreciation the people that produce those grapes should receive. It's more than just making a phone call and saying, when's my fruit going to be ready? So probably in some of the times where I've gotten frustrated with growers and what have you, I'd like to say that I have a better appreciation for how difficult that farming really is. Because it's been a while since I've been on a tractor. And I've kind of forgotten how tough it really is. That's probably what my takeaway is. How about you, David?
So one thing that keeps standing out for me is we had an unbelievable visit to a winery called Lopez de Heredia in Rioja. My son happens to be in Spain. He's a wine guy over there. And he did some spectacular appointments for us. Lopez de Heredia make wine today like they made it 200 years ago. And they even had a cooper on site that we saw working, and he was using equipment that was 100 years old hanging on the wall. And they intentionally choose to make wines that same way today. And boy, do we have it a lot easier today than those guys did from a couple hundred years ago. And I think we have cleanliness practices and other things that the industry has kind of evolved to over time. Now, they still make wines that are highly respected, but I think it was fascinating for me to really see how wines used to be made and what we're doing today. It was kind of eye-opening.
Any more questions, Molly? Okay.
Does anybody else have a question? Well, we can't.
I'll keep asking questions. I was waiting for other people though.
I have a
Am I
more
allowed
I have a
to?
more important question since I
wait.
just got back
I'm
from the
sorry.
airport.
I'm sorry. The
My
pilot
understanding
should've-
is you're a pilot and you fly something really cool.
Well, it's old, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Cool.
He literally walked in the door after you answered my last question, so I'm
Yeah.
sorry. But my question earlier was about, and I apologize, it's been 6 weeks since I've really looked at your website. How many SKUs do you guys have now? How many are you guys planning? What's your plan the next 2, 3, 5 years? Do you have a plan, or how far out are you doing your business, and are you trying to make more of the same or more different?
Such a deep
Problem.
question.
It is a
Good
good question.
Good
Yeah,
question.
the short answer is it would economically it'd be better for us to reduce the amount of those SKUs, and it'd be easier for us to do because it's cheaper and easier to make a larger quantity of less
And we'll
SKUs.
do that to some extent. too.
And but what we decided to do was to fine tune the SKUs that we have and decide what really best fits the brand and what our customers want. But then again, like I said earlier in the interview, we also want to keep the customer guessing by what we're going to do next. So right when I say we may drop a few things that we're not, we may or may not want to do in the future, we're also going to bring in something new right behind it. So the other factor is one of the downsides of buying source fruit like we do is you're subject to things happening in those vineyards, and in the last year alone, 3 of our major producing vineyards were bought out by large conglomerate wineries, and those vineyards are no longer. So we're constantly changing to different vineyard sources and having to, like I said, call audibles and shift on the fly and have to do what it needs to do to make the wines the way we're expected to. So I'd love to be able to tune it back to less SKUs, but over the next 5 years, I think we're going to be in experimental mode and try to decide. We'll be listening to our customers. We'll be listening to just about everybody on what their expectations are and what they're looking for us to do. But I don't see us cutting it that much.
We do have some ideas though. So one is, our Maniacal, which is our GSM blend, is a tribute to Chateauneuf du Pape, right? So we're going to be bottling a little later this year a tribute to the Northern Rhone. And so one of the things we want to do is actually address certain regions. In the future, we may pay a little more tribute to, and we don't have all of this in place yet, but Priorat is something that really we like.
We would love to do a dry farm Grenache Carignan blend, just like Priorat.
And
There you go. There's another SKU. So, it's really difficult to keep yourself stimulated and do things interesting for your consumers and try to reduce the amount of wines you're making.
But Scott also gave away that we are, for this year, for 23, we're going to do a dry farm cab. Now, what I really don't want to do is to launch into another full skewed product line that's Bordeaux style, right? Because each time you go into one of these, you're going to have 5 or 6 SKUs. So it might be a one and done, it might be not. So that's interesting for our wine club members. Scott's done a cab from this vineyard before. It ought to be really exciting for us. But another thing is that we are considering whether we might be able to gain some property on the west side of Paso, and we can add an estate element to what we do. We will never give up some of the vineyards we purchased from, but that can add a new element as well. So we are continually thinking about, different regions we might pay tribute to, different styles we might embrace, and some long-term strategies of maybe even some, vineyards of our own.
You remind me of Ridge in those conversations, even though Ridge already has.
We'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, a little Montebello.
I mean, because Ridge has their 2 properties, right? And then they buy a lot from others, and it's a mix. And as a member there, I'm always like, well, I kind of want to taste everything that they have.
Right.
I want to at least taste it every year. And they have a variety of price points too, right? In that, and so it's makes it interesting.
They've been buying grapes from Paso Robles for decades.
For a long time.
I didn't ask this when I was there. Which label is your flagship, or you would characterize as? That would be one that would never go away. The wine club members love,
Well, I don't know that we really have a flagship. I would say on the Pinot Noir side, what I would answer that a little bit cautiously by saying that the Radian Pinot Noir that we do sells out very rapidly. I think it's a fantastic vineyard. So if the amount of time we have it in stock is an indication, Radian, but I think all the Pinots are good. We occasionally have done a reserve Syrah, and it mostly derives from this Coast View vineyard that I did talk about earlier, We'll only do it in years that it makes sense, but the fruit is very unique from that site. And so we have done that, and that's been a really special wine also. It's fairly low quantity, so I don't know, is it a flagship? Not everybody really has access to it. I don't know. It isn't like literally the flagship. What do you
No,
think?
I think we're still evolving our flagship.
Yeah,
No, just, I just learned, there's always one that has,
No.
I read the comments from the members, they always go, there's always one. Doesn't mean the breadth of the other wines are not necessarily good. It just means there's just one that stands out above all, for every member. There's always one in that shipment that means more to them than, the club shipment.
yeah. Well,
Hey,
anything from Kushvi on the Rhone side and Radiant on the Pinot side. Sorry, there was another question.
It was just a question because you glitched right when you said what the Pinot was. So Radiant, is that the vineyard or where is that?
It's the vineyard. It's Santa Rita Hills. It's the westmost vineyard in Santa Rita Hills. It is on the south side of that valley, which is, I think, Santa Rosa Road. And it's just east of Lompoc on the south side. A lot of fog and cold.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, there's my wife. From Louisville.
Nice.
Well, unless anybody has any questions, anybody else? We
Can I,
can't.
can I say something that's not well, I can make
No,
it.
you can make a comment. Go
I
ahead.
can make my comment into a question. So talking about pricing and talking about the costs of wine going up, great. You talked about the cost of glass and corks and sleeves and all sorts of stuff, right? So have you considered using boxes for, your wines that aren't going to be aging? Have you considered using screw tops? Have you considered using lighter glass?
Yes to all those. I doubt you're going to see a box packaging type thing here, just because David and I are just too old and too traditional, and I feel it might be disrespectful to the
We're
wine.
not too old, Scott.
But as far as taking advantage of innovative technology to produce a better product, we're all about that. We from day one, we immediately talked about redoing the package with the different lighter glass and something a little more easier to deal with. And right in the middle of that conversation was the whole COVID supply chain debacle. And
Yeah, got it away.
because of most of that glass is an import, not domestic, we had to commit to almost 2 years of corks in advance and 2 years of foils in advance. And those foils are custom made to the exact top neck size of the existing bottle we used to use. So sadly, I've got 1.5 years now's worth of foils that I need to use up on those bottles until you'll still start seeing the smaller bottle and the lighter bottle come out.
Well,
But you
don't
will-
waste anything you have. I'm not saying that.
No, but
Okay.
you'll see it. It's
Yeah.
part of the plan. And yesterday we had an interesting spirited discussion with an outside person talking about screw caps.
Yeah, a professional wine writer in San
Yeah,
Francisco yesterday.
yeah.
We were having lunch with them, and she was pretty hard on me about, have you really considered this? Because in theory, it is a better closure. So if you're not going to be long-term aging these wines, you don't need the oxidative properties of a cork. Why are you not using a screw cap? And my answer to her was, marketing perception, really. As soon as I'm confident that customers are not going to say, well, it has a screw cap, so it must be a lesser quality wine. As soon as I'm confident people will feel that way and the consumers get a little more educated that way, I think that we may all end up that way. It makes more sense.
It's a chicken and egg thing, though.
Yeah,
And
It
for,
is.
for somebody who
yeah.
wine buying problem. I am somebody who cares about what the juice is inside and not what the packaging is. And I don't need to be paying FedEx and GPS and UPS and all these other people more money to get it to my house.
Yes.
That is, I would rather put it in your pocket than theirs.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I absolutely agree. And if anybody owns wine fridges here, if everybody would just put their wine in Zin, I call them Zin bottles, Riley Hubbard was on here 2 months ago, and I go, thank you. Because it's so hard to get some of these big fat bottles out of the drawers. The fridge manufacturers don't make adjustments for it. They say, oh, remove one of the drawers and stack a little bit, and I'm like,
Yeah. So all of a sudden your whatever 50 bottle wine fridge only holds.
but I agree with Laura. It matters what's in the bottle, but I know packaging sells, so.
And particularly for you guys, if you're not trying to sell at the grocery store,
Yeah.
right, then you're telling your story to the right people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter to them as much. It's different competing at the at Safeway and Rayleigh's and whatever.
I think that's a great argument, Laura. And so it's one we debate around here a lot.
I remember buying a bottle of the Camus 40th anniversary cab. It was in a 1 liter bottle. And I go,
Oh, yeah.
brilliant. This is brilliant because this is just the right amount of wine for my wife and I to consume. Before you open the second bottle, right? And so you don't open the second bottle because this is just enough. And I was going brilliant, but it was unsustainable at Total Wine or wherever because it didn't fit the prefab bins that they're accustomed to using. But I would go, I pay, whatever it is, you're paying a little more per ounce, of course, but I like the 1 liter bottle.
Yeah.
Although the fridges wouldn't handle it very well.
No.
So anybody else?
Okay.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. And Scott, it was nice to meet you.
That's my
We
pleasure.
really appreciate your time. And
Mike, thank you so much. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, keep up the great job doing what you're doing.
well, it's been pretty popular. I hope it keeps going this way. But we thank you so much for taking time out to join us, and I really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
And if anybody wants to hang on for a little bit, that's fine. And like usual.
Did Molly just leave? No, Molly's here still. Anyway, yeah, so Scott and David, the resolution, so I've never had your wine before tonight until I Corvined it tonight. This resolution white blend
Is pretty badass.
It's completely different. It really surprised me when